a bit 16, you've never seen a review like this. Weird old games you cannot tame, these things you don't miss. Snes Man is the champion, he is 16-bit. Snes Man is the champion, he is 16-bit.
Hello, I'm Snes Man. Like every brainwashed kid in my generation, I loved Power Rangers when I was little. Even though it was hideous, I loved it. So, naturally, I played the video game, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Is it any good? Is it at least better than the show? Let's find out. Okay, Power Rangers. I know they're lame, but I'm gonna give this game a fair chance. Or at least as fair as I can be with 90s teenagers in tights. Let's get down to gaming. Yes, Power Rangers theme! I have to say, this leaves a great first impression. Not only does this song sound good and just like the TV show, but it includes vocals. For a cartridge-based game, yeah, that was pretty cool. Here are the Power Rangers, a pompous lineup of teenagers who think they can save the world. The question is, can they save this game? Let's play as Jason, the leader of the Power Rangers, and find out. You begin each level as a Power Ranger without their silly spandex suits on. You use your bare fists this time to take down putties. Putties are pretty much Goomba-type creatures. You hit them once or a couple times and they die and explode. So after a while of pummeling putties, you get about halfway through the stage and transform into your true Ranger self. Okay, the embarrassment's sinking in. I'm playing as a Power Ranger now. It actually turns out that once you turn into a Power Ranger in this game, it gets a lot more fun. Your character has different weapons, like axes, daggers called sai, a trident, a bow and arrow, and of course Jason with his sword. Once the weapons come into play, the game becomes a lot more interesting. You don't feel so embarrassed that you're playing a Power Rangers game, because now you can beat up putties and massacre them. What's surprising is this is actually a very solid game considering the cheesy source material. The controls are very tight and it's a good straightforward action game. Here's how the controls work. The Y button is the punch or using your weapon. B button is jump. Pretty straightforward. X button unleashes your super attack. This attack shows a cool animation depending on which ranger you chose and wipes out most enemies on screen. You can only use it about once or twice per level. So really the controls aren't very complex, but there are a few little interesting things, like holding up while you press Y does a stronger, slower swipe, and pressing B twice quickly does a backwards flip. Yes, I just figured out that flip now, kind of embarrassing. Once you play the first level, you pretty much know what you're in store for the rest of the game. Straightforward beat-em-up action. There are some platformer elements though, like vertical stages and swimming levels. These do break up the monotony a little bit, but in the end, you're playing a very standard game. Plow through the waves of enemies that all look the same and get to the end of the level. Now that's not necessarily a bad thing. The simple action fits the Power Rangers well because this is a kid's game and it's not very challenging. But it certainly doesn't rise above the crowds of other good games on the Super Nintendo. For the most part, this game isn't very difficult either, but the developers did hide a little nugget of difficulty in each of the bosses. These guys have pretty interesting designs, and they're fun to fight, because they're much more difficult than the putties. Some of them are downright weird, like this eyeball monster, but I think it adds a little more interest into this relatively bland game. And trust me, their weirdness fits in with the Power Rangers universe. But other than these guys, the rest of the game doesn't have many challenges except cheap hits. The putties tend to swarm you and hit you with their knives so you can't escape, and during the chaos you can lose a lot of health. Some of the enemies, like the ones with the weapons, can be a downright chore to kill. You keep knocking them down, but they get back up. You knock them down again, they get back up. Like these dark green ones, just die! After a while, the game gets plain tedious. You just get sick of knocking out thousands of palette-swapped putties. Even though you have a couple different kinds of attacks you can use during the game, it's still not a huge variety. You're still doing the same thing, swiping at hordes. These putties get on my nerves. They're kind of like creepy stalkers. They move around like this, and follow you. For instance, you're Kimberly crawling through this narrow space, and this putty drops out of nowhere and comes up just to poke you in the butt. How long did that putty sit in the sewer, waiting and waiting until it was time to poke a Power Ranger in the butt? That is just a pathetic existence. So there are some cheesy, lame aspects of this game. What do you expect? It's Power Rangers. But also there's some good parts, like the soundtrack, generic but good. The music kind of sums up the gameplay. Nothing incredibly new or original, but nothing bad at the same time. It has many flaws, but also some good points. For instance, the graphics are good, the controls are very responsive, and the game gets really cool at the end. The Power Rangers unite their incredible powers to create the colossal, the unbeatable Optimus Prime! Megazord. The last two levels throw out the beat-em-up system and let you play as a Megazord. It feels very fresh and interesting after all the putty grinding. It plays very much like Street Fighter 2, and it's pretty advanced for a Power Ranger game. Sadly, the very last level is a little anticlimactic. The enemy doesn't look that intimidating, and he's not that hard to beat. Also, it feels really short. I think this is only the 7th level in the game, and it's the last. But of course we get to see a glorious ending after this short adventure. Nope, it's just the Power Rangers sitting in a car with cheap animations. Oh well, I wasn't expecting a theatrical masterpiece from the Power Rangers anyway.
Things to make it better.
More varied enemies, not just stalker putties. A few more moves and special attacks to use, less cheap hits on the enemies that can gang up on you easily, and a 2-player mode. I know there's a cheat that lets you play a 2-player Megazord battle, but that just doesn't count. And finally, just a little more general creativity. In the end, however, I kind of enjoyed Power Rangers. It's really simple and doesn't bring anything new to the beat-em-up table, but I still kind of like it. A 6 out of 10. So I actually kind of liked Power Rangers, however embarrassing it is. But call me insane or whatever, but when I hear that song, it just moves my heart. It makes me remember the good old days of the sugar high and the running around causing havoc. Let's hear that song again.
Go, Snes Man Ranger. Go, Snes Man Ranger. Go, Snes Man Ranger. Mighty 16-bit Ranger.